Kingdom, their legislature, hopefully you know, is called Parliament. And their parliament is called bicameral. Or their parliament is bicameral. And we talked about this word in class briefly. And bicameral means two parts. Prefix bi means two. So it's two parts, and that's similar to our government, where our government is called Congress, and it breaks down into two parts. So the UK's parliament breaks down into two parts. If you remember, those two parts are called the House of Commons and the House of Lords. Now, there's a lot of information that I could give you today, but I'm trying to give you that need-to-know information. So we've learned a lot of stuff that it's nice to know, some extensions, but today we're focusing on that need-to-know information. So what you need to know about the House of Commons is that it is more powerful than the House of Lords because it controls the, and maybe you remember the key word here is budget. Okay, another thing that we need to know about the United Kingdom is we need to know who is our chief executive. So chief executive, and that is the Prime Minister. And the way that the Prime Minister for the UK is chosen is different than our country. So for our country, the citizens directly vote for the President, our chief executive. But in the United Kingdom, they don't directly vote for the Prime Minister. They directly vote for the members of the House of Commons, and the House of Commons member political party that has the most members, the leader of that political party, is the new Prime Minister. So, Prime Minister is the leader of the political party with the most members. And the other thing we need to know is the head of state. And this person is the monarch. And her role is symbolic. So, England used to have an autocracy, and specifically a monarchy, where they had a king or queen that was ruling. They no longer have that. They're now a democracy. But for traditional reasons, they've kept that royal family. So the monarch is the head of state. They have a symbolic, traditional role, but they can't make laws for the country. Right now, the monarch is a queen, but in the future it could be a king, so we say monarch because that would describe both genders. So we are now done with the United Kingdom, so let's move on to Germany. In Germany, the legislature is called, maybe you remember, the answer is Parliament. And just like in the United Kingdom, the Parliament in Germany is bicameral, which means there are two parts. So let's talk about those two parts. All right, so one part is called the Bundestag, and that is my best pronunciation. And the other one is called the Bundesrat. And we need to know which one has more power, and the answer is the Bundestag. So more power, and we need to know the reason, and it is similar to the United Kingdom. The reason is because it controls the budget. Okay, and the other thing that we need to know, so this is a quicker one, is we need to know who is the chief exec. Chief exec in Germany, and that is the chancellor. All right, so there's Germany for you. Hopefully you're seeing some similarities between these two governments. Okay, so let's move on to Russia. Let me grab my red marker. Okay, so Russia's legislature is called the Federal Assembly. And just like the other two governments, it is bicameral and it has two parts. And the two parts are the State Duma Confederation Council. And you can probably figure out what I want you to know here. I want you to know which one has more power, and that is the State Duma. More power because it makes laws and controls budget. Okay, so we need to know who is the chief executive / head of government. And that is the prime minister, but his role is not as large as the head of state, and that person is the president. Now, another thing that we need to know about this is that the president, I'm videotaping my lesson. Okay, the president is he is elected by the people. The prime minister is selected by the president. Okay, so hopefully what you gathered from this, they all have two parts. They all have one part that has more power. They all have a chief executive. You need to know the different chief executives. You need to know the different parts of their legislatures, and you need to know which ones have more power, and you need to know why. Okay, so sorry, I was looking for my eraser. Okay, so the next thing that we are going to talk about is the different kinds of governments. Okay, so every country has to decide two things. How are they going to distribute power, and how are they going to allow citizens to participate? What's the role of the citizens going to be? So we've got distribute power. And there are three options for how you distribute power. You can use the unitary system, you can use the federal system, or you can use the confederation system. Okay, so a quick simplified example of these three systems. For unitary, they have a strong central government, and they have regional governments, little smaller units, but the regional governments only get power that the central government gives them. So I'm going to draw little arrows towards the regional governments. And if the central government feels like the regional governments are not doing a good job, they can get rid of them. Or if the central government feels like the leader of a regional government is not doing a good job, they can get rid of the leader and they can pick a new leader. This is the most common distribution of power in the world. This is what France and Great Britain has. So the next one we're going to talk about is confederation. Now, in a confederation, you have regional governments that are working together for a common goal. The regional governments hold the power. The only way that the central government can get power is when all of these member nations agree. So one example, the closest example, is the European Union. The European Union has 28 member countries. All 28 member countries would have to agree for something to become a law. There is no one country with a confederation anymore. The United States tried it, but it just didn't work out. It's really hard to enforce laws because the central government is so weak. So a confederation is pretty much the opposite of a unitary government. A federal government is kind of like a combination. So the United States ended up going to a federal government because they needed some control from a central government, like in the unitary model, but they also wanted their regional governments, the states, to have some powers too. So a visual representation, here's your central gov, And here are your regional governments. In the United States, those are called states. Canada, they're called provinces and territories. So I drew them overlapping because they have some shared powers, like both the state government and the federal government can collect taxes. But the regional governments have some powers that the state governments don't have. Remember we took that Kahoot quiz and we talked about how in Alabama we talked about the silly laws. In Alabama there's a law that says you can't wear a fake mustache in church that's going to make other people laugh. Well, that's not a law, that's a federal law, and that's not a law in every 50 states. So some of the states can have different laws from each other. So they have this part, regional governments have their own laws, central government has some of their own laws, and they have some shared powers that they have together. So this is what the United States has, Canada has this, Australia has this, and in a federal government, if the central government feels like the governor of a state or the leader of a state's not doing a good job, they don't have the power to get rid of that governor. They also don't have the power to get rid of an entire regional government. So this is everything that you need to know about distribution of power. Okay, so next up is